Everyone, welcome to another edition of the Daily Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today is John Richardson. John is a longtime friend of mine and co-host of the Polite Society podcast with me, has been for many years. I was just looking at, John, you sent me a link earlier today from a blog post you wrote in 2015 where you were discussing something we talked on the air on Polite Society podcast about. So you've been doing PSP for about 6 years at least.
It might go back a little more than that even. I think we were back on PSP back to somewhere around episode 200, 215-ish.
Okay. Well, and yeah, we're above 550 now, so it's been you and I have worked together a bunch. Let's put it that way.
A long time, yeah.
So I want to remind everybody, if you want your comment, if you just go ahead and comment on the live video. If it's relevant to what John and I are talking about, we'll put it on the air and we'll discuss your comments. And DJ Plain Ice and Guns and Barbecue are already over on the YouTube channel commenting. Let's go ahead and get started. First story of the day I want to talk about, John. Looks like Massachusetts is looking to push Smith & Wesson out of state. There's been legislation introduced where you cannot manufacture AR-15s in the state now.
Yeah, I saw that when you sent it to me. They're really looking to kill good jobs. And in Massachusetts, those would be good union jobs. What the saddest part about the whole thing is that one of their somebody who is a Springfield representative, in other words, who should be supporting the local company, is just going along with the gun banners, the gun prohibitionist, saying, oh yeah, okay. I mean, AR-15s are evil and dangerous, yet they're still going to be allowed to make them for police, for foreign governments, for the military. Not that the military buys AR-15s from Smith & Wesson.
No,
and
they
handguns
have the fun switch on everything the military buys.
Oh, you betcha. So what is even sadder is that the 19th, 2 days ago, was Patriots Day. And what was the Battle of Lexington and Concord over? Gun confiscation.
Cannons, but yes.
But they were after the powder stores, the lead, the stuff that was hidden in barns in Concord. The militias, the Massachusetts Bay Colony's militias' weapons. And these legislators forget all about it. It's sad. They don't know their history. Or they do, and they just choose to ignore it.
Well, you don't even have to go very far deep into history. They can just call to anybody that lives in, Ilion, New York, and find out what happens when Remington folds.
Well, fortunately for some of the workers in Ilion, the new owners of Rim Arms, as it's now going to be called, have opened up that plant again. Now, we're talking probably a fraction of what the workforce used to be at one time, but they brought back 45, and they're hoping to have 200 by the end of this month, but still.
Yeah. Regardless, it's not what it was.
No. And all you remember is when Remington had the chance, they moved as much of their operations out of New York State down to Huntsville, Alabama as that they could, for that very reason.
Let's talk. The next story I wanted to talk about, you're familiar with because it's in your backyard. In Raleigh, they've introduced a bill that would end the sheriff permitting process in North Carolina. And I've heard you talk about this one before. The sheriff permitting process goes back to the days of slavery, right?
Not quite that far, but it does go back to the Jim Crow era. It was a bill file. Our pistol purchase permit system goes back to 1919, And originally it was the clerk of superior court that would give it to you, and then they changed it to the sheriff. And if you wanted a handgun, and at one time if you wanted a crossbow, you had to go to your sheriff and get a permit. You still do. Basically, when the law was originated, the goal was not to keep white folk from having handguns, but to keep blacks, union activists, populists, maybe Republicans, but not as much, from having handguns. Over the years, the law has been amended. What's most remarkable is that in the past, the North Carolina Sheriff's Association has been standing in the way of getting rid of the permit. And the arguments against having the permit, beyond the racism factor, is that with the NICS system, it's superfluous. Let's say I go and get a North Carolina pistol purchase permit. I commit a felony. My permit's good for 5 years. I'm already a felon. So why not just compound it, and I'll go to a dealer, and it substitutes for a NICS check. And it's happened. Whereas with the NICS system, they would have been flagged immediately.
Couple of
some
comments
sheriffs
I want to get in quick.
Sure.
If that's all right. Amanda Suffolcool, our partner on Polite Society, she's one of our co-hosts that makes it most weeks, says, hey, y'all keep up the good 2A work, keeping people informed, educated, and on point. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for watching. And then John says, Beretta moved out of Maryland. I'd forgotten about that one.
Yeah, they moved to Gallatin, Tennessee.
And there was that California rifle manufacturer that moved to Wyoming. That one has lost. I lost that one.
Weatherby.
Yes, Weatherby.
How much more California can you get than the old Weatherbys? They moved to, I want to say, Cody, Wyoming. That was a big announcement at the 2018 or 2019 SHOT Show. They had the governor of Wyoming there, the whole 9 yards. Back to the getting rid of the pistol purchase permit in North Carolina. The Sheriff's Association has now said that they want to get rid of it because they see the problems in it. It's gone to one of our judiciary committees. We have at least 4 or 5 in the House. It's passed out of committee. It's going to the House as a whole with a substitute now that the sheriffs are officially against it. It should pass the House. It could pass the Senate. Basically, then it'll go to the governor, who my guess is will veto it. And unfortunately, the Republicans don't have a supermajority. But what I would just look the governor in the face and say is, there are statistics that will show that blacks are 3 times more likely to be denied having a pistol permit than whites. It was a study just recently done in the North Carolina Law Journal from the UNC Law School. Okay. What do you have against blacks being armed? Call them out on it.
Exactly. I want to get a couple more comments in here. And the first one is, Michael says, any gun law other than the 2A is a direct infringement of the 2A. Michael, on principle, I absolutely agree with you. I am a practical man, and there's steps for us to get there. But you and I agree 100% philosophically, Michael.
It reminds me of something Gene Hoffman, who was with California Gun Rights Foundation, said once. He said, it took us 40 years to lose our gun rights, and we're going to have to win it back one step at a time.
DJ Play Nice has a great question, and this one speaks, I think, straight to you, John. Whoops, where do we go? He said, UNC make any other racial distinctions? Do you remember that study? Did they break it up besides just black, or?
No, they didn't. They didn't. Okay. And this was actually just from one county. It was from Wake County, which is where Raleigh, where the state capital is located, which is actually now the largest county in the state with somewhere about 1 million population.
Okay.
It's also where the Second Amendment Foundation has joined with Grassroots North Carolina in suing the sheriff, along with the Firearms Policy Coalition, just suing Sheriff Gerald Baker for refusing to accept applications for pistol permits due to the pandemic.
There's the other one that I remember off the top of my head. SAF is suing in Illinois, and I think they're a part of the lawsuit in Detroit as well, where the county that Detroit is in, and I forget the name of the county.
Wayne County.
Wayne County is being sued. I think SAF is part of that lawsuit, but I am not an inner circle member of the SAF, so I don't, and I have no say on where what suits go. So I can't tell you absolutely for sure. John Gowrie says, I'm moving out of commie New York to USA, Tennessee, and I am leaving everything New York related behind. John, you are not alone. That is a big trend. Texas is getting more Californicated every day, and Florida is already full of New Yorkers, and more are coming.
So is North Carolina. Though Tennessee is a good state to move to. I have a friend of mine, Dennis Batterina, who did the same thing. He moved down to Tennessee and became a gun dealer. He's also a custom holster maker, makes beautiful work.
Cool. Our friend Rob Morris, who is out of the country, I speculated yesterday that I think he's trying to get artifacts off the Titanic, but he's one that moved from California that is very restrictive to Louisiana that is fairly free.
And to make it even, Rob is a California native.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame when you have to leave your native state because of that.
Yeah. I see a
Define
lot
freedom.
of people doing it. And our friend Miguel Gonzalez had a great Facebook post the other day. He looked up the price of renting a U-Haul from New York down to Florida and Florida back to New York. From Florida to New York was $1,000 cheaper than the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right.
We talked about Wake County. Well, there's a city in Wake County called Cary. And actually, my wife used to live there way back in the 50s, back when it was population less than 5,000. Mm-hmm. Now the population's well over 100,000. And we call it, actually, it stands for Containment Area for Relocated Yankees, because so many people from New York, New Jersey, and up that way have moved down to Cary.
Another good comment from Michael. A right paid for by permit or any other means is no longer a right. It is then a privilege. People say they want their rights, but at the same time then sell them away for a privilege. It's sad. That's pretty much on point there too. I'm thinking on that one, I'm thinking of the $200, soon to be $300 tax stamp for suppressors and short-barreled rifles, short-barrel shotguns.
And the reason that suppressors were even on there is that supposedly they wanted to stop poaching during the Depression. And there never have been, I have a suppressor. The best thing I can say about my suppressor in terms of noise, I still will wear earplugs, but it really is a great recoil reducer.
The only time I've ever heard a truly silenced weapon was a .22 rifle that had a can on it. And when they used subsonic ammo, which would not fully cycle,
mm-hmm.
the loudest thing you could hear was the projectile hitting the target downrange.
Yeah, in terms of once you get outside of .22, about the only handgun where, for the most part, you can use subsonic ammo and it will work is a 45 automatic.
Okay.
40 because 45 ACP is just below the limit. So as long as you're not using hot ammo, using just plain old ball, you should be okay.
Okay. All right. John Gowrie has one more comment I want to put up. I visited Raleigh to see family, and I saw how New York is already ruining that area. Wrote it off last time I visited them.
I don't blame you, John. I would not want to live there.
And you don't live anywhere close. You are North Carolina, but you're nowhere close to Raleigh.
No, I'm almost on the Tennessee border, but I will admit that when I retire and when my wife retires, we're seriously considering moving more towards the center of this deck to what we call the Piedmont, more the center of the state, to one of the more conservative counties, because Asheville has been overrun. It used to be a nice little town full of hippies, gays, mountaineers, rednecks, retirees, and everybody got along fine. And now it's cancel culture writ large, and we're just sick of it. It's the only county in West North Carolina like that, but...
DJ Play Nice says the squirrels appreciate suppressors too. I would imagine they do. I know the deer like them because they don't get scared and run for a couple miles when one goes off.
You know what the weird thing is? That you go to all these European countries that have tons and tons and tons of gun control, and you can go into a sporting goods or a gun store and buy a suppressor, and in fact, you're encouraged to buy one. And I'm looking at South African gun stores. The price is a third of ours, and you just walk in and buy your can for your .338 Winchester mag.
Nice. Valentine says, so still feeling hopefully SCOTUS will take up the Second Amendment case? If so, which one? This week they kept one, didn't accept it. They kept one and refused two, is what's happened this week so far. I do not happen to have that story up in front of me, and my memory is not good enough right now to tell you which ones got accepted and which ones didn't. John, how's your memory?
Well, the two that they denied cert to were both involving nonviolent felons and whether or not they had the right, whether or not the Second Amendment covered them. And they just refused to hear that. Amy Coney Barrett is fully in, from what I've read before, past decisions, thinks that nonviolent felons should not be denied their rights.
I agree with
her. The one that they kept, I think one that they did keep was from New York about carry permits. I think they will be hearing the, was it Young versus Hawaii or Young versus Honolulu, where the Ninth Circuit said that nobody has a right to carry outside the home.
That would be the one that
the Second Amendment.
That would do us the most good.
Absolutely. And that's the one I hope they take.
Kyle replied to that one and said, they aren't. This is a solidly anti-2A court, even with ACB on the bench. I'm going to use an example to disagree with you on this. Alan Gottlieb is so much smarter than this stuff, about this stuff, than I am. Alan believes that, and he's said the reason we are pushing so many cases right now, we have 35 cases throughout the nation, and more are coming. The reason we are pushing so many cases right now is because the court is much more likely to rule in our favor.
I think both Thomas and Alito want a case that they think they can win, and then the three newest justices I think will go along. I have no faith in John Roberts, but I would also see him voting with it so he can assign the case or write the decision. Otherwise, it goes to Clarence Thomas.
Yeah. Steve says drinks, tax evaders, and forgers aren't where we want to start. You've got to start somewhere, man. We are not going to get the 1934 Gun Control Act thrown out next week. as John said earlier, it took us 40 years. Well, now it's taken us 80 years to get from the Gun Control Act to where we are now. We're not going to get it back tomorrow. You've got to, our rights were eroded one step at a time. We're going to get them back one step at a time.
You're absolutely correct on that.
Raven says, hope you're feeling better. I'm feeling better today than yesterday. I certainly am. I'm not anywhere close to 100%. And I think you ought to be able to see that in the broadcast. Things are not as snappy as I like to keep them. But I'm able to get things done as long as I can broadcast. I'm going to. I hear this a lot, and I want to comment on this one. Barry says the simple thing to do is don't bring your New Jersey politics or voting habits with you. If you voted for the politicians who are trampling on our rights and creating more problems than solving. Barry, that is a huge... Talk to people in Colorado about that. They're going to be right there with you. Texas is going to be right there with you. That is a huge
North Carolina.
Problem. That's a huge problem. Anywhere people are coming in to a free state from a not so free state is the people that move there bring their voting habits with them. And go ahead.
Look
Jen.
at Virginia.
Yes.
Yeah, look at Virginia, which used to be a very conservative state. You have all the people moving to the Metro DC area, living off the government, and brought their liberal politics, well, their anti-gun politics with them. It's funny, my roommate from college lived in Metro DC in Silver Spring, Maryland, and he has now moved, and he was, to put it bluntly, a socialist in college, and still fairly radical, but as he's retiring from the federal government, he's becoming more and more conservative and just moved to Ohio.
There you go. Not exactly a liberal fantasy land there.
No.
Guns and Barbecue says, good God, this sounds like what I was saying on my show last night. Kind of creepy. Here's an opportunity, Guns and Barbecue. Comment with your show and a link, and I'll give you a plug, bud. I wasn't aware you had a show. So, Cheryl Cook says, I'm in Virginia. The few big areas have ruined our freedoms. That's exactly what happened in New York and is happening in California.
I mean, you go to western New York and northern, up in the Adirondacks, it's no different than, South Dakota. For the most part, people believe in gun rights. It's just like being in downstate Illinois. You believe in gun rights, but one big metro area controls your state.
When they were in the process of getting shall issue permitting in Illinois, just before that went through, there were several sheriffs down south that were saying, look, doesn't matter what the state says, we will accept your out-of-state permit down here. I have not heard anything after shall issue went through, if that's still the case or not. I still follow the letter of the law when I go through Illinois. I disarm before I hit the state line. I drive all the way through without stopping. And then once I get out of state, I will stop and rearm.
What I tend to do now is when we go to St. Louis, we cross at Cairo. In other words, I am in the state for all of 1 mile in and out as quickly as possible.
Terry Dexter says, New Hampshire is turning into North Massachusetts. Man, I feel for you. I seen a few. I don't have them in front of me right now, but I've seen a few. I do searches every day for news stories relating to gun control and news stories relating to Second Amendment and gun rights, among other search terms. But I've been seeing more and more gun control stories coming out of New Hampshire, which is, for me, rather surprising.
It used to be the most conservative state in New England. Um, northern New England has been infiltrated by people from Massachusetts. I won't use the expression that they're also called by the locals. And Vermont has been invaded by people moving from New York. Massachusetts has exported a lot of their... people move there for tax reasons, but they still bring their... a lot of them are bringing their anti-gun politics with them.
Going back to the moving, Robert Wagner says, the reason I'm moving is to be with like-minded people. Being a conservative in New Jersey is like being lost in the middle of the ocean, cold and alone. I vote on 2 issues, gun rights and lower taxes. And that's where the software cuts him off. I want to say, Barry, South Dakota will open you with open arms, especially if you're going to vote like that. We have an awesome, awesome governor, and you'd be a great addition to our state.
Well, your home state is actually doing a great job recruiting gun companies to South Dakota. I've seen their stuff at... they've been at SHOT Show. Yeah.
They're there every year, and we are actively, not just gun companies, all companies. South Dakota has never shut down when every other state was locked down tighter than a drum. South Dakota never had any restrictions on business. And we are actively recruiting all companies to come. And it's being fairly successful. Sioux Falls, our population is projected just to boom over the next 10 years. Gus Chandler says, so glad to live in Texas. Just hope they pass constitutional carry, even though I have my carry license. Gus, I want to go off on that. I've discussed it the last couple daily shows, but I want to do it again today. Permitless carry, I do not like calling it constitutional carry, and I've discussed that before. Permitless carry is in the Texas Senate right now. The person that can move it through the Senate is the lieutenant governor, and he's been sitting because he's been saying, I just don't know if we have the votes. So he hasn't even started the process yet. I'm going to request anybody who does live in Texas, call him. That's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick at 843-383-8632. And let him know that you expect him to do his job and shepherd permitless carry through the Senate. Also, I want you to look up and call your own Texas state senator and tell them you want them to vote for it when it happens. Right now it's in the hands of the people, and Rachel Malone, we talked to her a week ago this past Saturday. She would absolutely agree. It's in your hands. You need to put pressure on your lawmakers, Texans. I'll keep doing, as long as I keep remembering to do it, I will keep reminding everybody to do that. Gus Chandler says, I've called him and emailed him and called his office. Good on you, Gus. All right. Jamie says, Alaska has a statute that prevents state and local governments from using dollars or resources to enforce federal laws that might threaten our Second Amendment rights. While other states like Arizona are just now passing these laws, our state has had it, and I don't have since. And I think that's since. It looks like 2013 from her comment. I was able to pull up the full comment. Jamie, I want to point out one state, and John, I think Missouri's, and I don't remember very clearly, but I do remember Missouri had a clause something like all federal restrictions, past, present, and future. So if Missouri's were to go through, that means the 1934 Gun Control Act goes away, the 1968 the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 68 are no longer going to be enforced. That would be interesting.
Yeah, you're going to, what I think you would have is you would have the feds still trying to enforce it because it's a federal law.
Mm-hmm.
They, one would hope that they would get no help from local law enforcement, no help from their sheriffs, no help from the State Department of Justices. But they would, that I hate to say it, that they're going to go in and try to enforce it, and they're going to try to drag people into federal court for violating a federal law. Now, are they doing that with marijuana? Oh, no. They're just letting more and more states just ignore federal law. Do I think marijuana should be decriminalized? Absolutely. But it's still a federal law. But, the people who most likely to support decriminalizing it are either libertarian or Democrats.
Yeah, I consider myself a libertarian. I don't care what you want to smoke or what pills you want to take, as long as it doesn't affect me. You do what you want to do. That's me personally. I don't care.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm all about freedom myself. All right, and Robert says Missouri's looking favorably. Kevin Sona says Texas isn't as Texas as people think they are. They're under a massive anti-gun assault. A lot of that is just the Bloombergs and others spending money advertising in the state. And unfortunately, that can be effective. I just wish there were a billionaire who loved freedom that would start advertising.
Yeah, I think one of the guys a billionaire that did love freedom, just died not long ago, Sheldon Adelson, who's the guy who owns the Sands Expo Center where the SHOT Show was held. Mm-hmm. And he had given buku bucks to Republican candidates. But, you kind of wish the Kochs got more involved in gun rights.
This one is directly at you, John. And DJ says, what should we be efforting toward in linking divergent citizen views regarding decriminalization?
That's a good question. I think you would want to encourage your state to, pass a Second Amendment sanctuary status. Mm-hmm. A lot of counties in Virginia did it. A lot of counties in North Carolina did it. A lot of counties around the country did it.
I was doing research for an article that I never actually got to finish writing because I was doing this research and then my stroke hit. But I do remember very clearly 1,100 cities and counties in the United States as of March 1st had declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries.
That makes about 1/3, with about 3,200 municipalities and counties.
Okay. And there's more every day.
Unfortunately, it's not the large population areas.
No, it's not.
I think one of the things that we're really going to have to do is show the impact on blacks, Hispanics, Asian Americans from gun control, how they're not being allowed to protect themselves where they live. That was what the beauty of Otis McDonald. He realized that the gun control laws of Chicago prohibited him essentially from protecting his family against gangbangers in his neighborhood. And this was a man who had fought for his country, mm-hmm. who fought racial injustice, who left the Jim Crow South to move to what he perceived to be a place that was freer and more welcoming to African Americans.
All right, well, we're at 34 minutes into a 30-minute show. So, John, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad I could help.
Absolutely. Folks, we are going to shut the show down here. what I would really encourage you to do if you're watching on YouTube, like the channel and hit the notification bell so you know when we release another live video. If you're on Facebook, of course, like our page and come join us 5 p.m. Central Time, wherever you're at right now, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Central Time, as long as I don't have a medical appointment at that specific time. And I don't foresee any. But tomorrow we do have, you folks asked for Florida news yesterday, and Sean Carana of Florida Carry is coming on tomorrow to talk about what's happening with laws in the Florida legislature. So that's what's going on right now. Come join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central Time, and we'll see you then. Thanks again, everybody.